There is no pain quite like the pain inflicted by those you once trusted, by the very family who was supposed to stand by your side. Strangers can wound, but their words are like passing shadows. Here one moment, gone the next. But when it is your own blood, your own family who wrongs you, the wound cuts deep, lingering in the soul like a scar that refuses to fade. Perhaps you have sat alone at night, replaying their words, their actions, wondering what you did to deserve such betrayal. They dismissed your kindness, ridiculed your efforts, ignored your suffering, and yet walked away as if nothing ever happened. Maybe you held on to hope that they would change, that one day they would see their mistakes, that they would come back and say, "I'm sorry." But instead they continue as if you were the villain, as if the pain they caused was somehow justified. Have you ever asked yourself why God allowed this? Does He not see your suffering? Does He not hear the silent cries you have buried deep within? Oh, He sees everything. He is the God who hears the voice of the forsaken, the God who bottles the tears of the broken-hearted. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Not a single tear has gone unnoticed. Not one moment of your suffering has been ignored by heaven. And though it may seem like they have escaped consequence, justice is not blind, nor is God slow in His judgment. There is a season for everything, and while they may laugh today, there is a divine reckoning coming. For it is written, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows." Galatians 6:7. They planted seeds of betrayal, of dishonor, of cruelty, and the harvest is inevitable. You may not see it now. You may look at their lives and wonder why they seem to prosper while you are left in pain. But do not be fooled. God's justice does not always arrive when we expect it, but it never fails to come. Do you remember Joseph, the man who was betrayed by his own brothers? They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and walked away as if his life had no worth. For years it seemed like they had won. They went back to their father, continued their lives, while Joseph suffered as a slave, falsely accused and thrown into prison. But God was watching. The very ones who cast him aside were the ones who one day had to stand before him, desperate and broken, begging for help. The tables turned, and God lifted Joseph so high that those who betrayed him could do nothing but bow before him. You may feel like Joseph right now, cast into a pit by those who should have protected you. But just as God raised him up, God is preparing a place for you where those who wronged you will have no choice but to witness your rise. They thought they buried you, but they did not know you were a seed. They thought they could escape accountability, but they did not account for God. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord. Romans 12:19. What does this mean? It means you do not have to fight. You do not have to seek revenge. You do not have to waste your energy trying to make them see their wrongs. God Himself will handle them. Maybe right now they walk with arrogance, feeling untouchable. Maybe they slander your name, spreading lies, making you out to be the villain while they play the victim. But even if the world is fooled, God is not. For it is written, "There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." Luke 12:02. The truth will come to light, and when it does, you will not need to lift a finger, because God Himself will be your defender. How does God deal with those who have wronged you? He lets them walk their own path, thinking they are free, until one day the very same pain they caused returns to them. The relationships they cherished will turn sour. The peace they once had will crumble. The laughter they mocked you with will turn into weeping. For when you mistreat the people God loves, you do not fight against them, you fight against God Himself. Touch not my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Psalm 105:15. You are his anointed. You are his chosen, and the family who rejected you, who mistreated you, who laughed at your suffering, they have unknowingly set themselves against God. So do not waste another tear over their actions. Do not dwell in bitterness, waiting for them to acknowledge their wrongs. Instead, walk forward, knowing that heaven's justice is already moving. Now, you may ask, how do I know God is already working? How can I see the signs? Let's uncover the toxic traits that expose those who have wronged you, and how their actions are now leading them toward divine justice. There is something unsettling about the way life works. One day you are at the mercy of those who believe they hold power over you. Family who disregards your kindness, who treats your heart as something disposable. They speak as though your presence means nothing, dismissing your worth with a wave of their hand, convinced that you will always be there, enduring their mistreatment. But what happens when God steps in? What happens when the ones who wronged you begin to experience the same loss they once forced you to endure? What happens when the very things they took for granted, their peace, their security, their relationships, start to slip through their fingers like grains of sand? At first they do not notice it. Their pride blinds them. They carry on, assuming that their lives will continue as usual, that the pain they inflicted upon you will never return to them. They mocked your suffering, so why would they ever imagine that they too might suffer? But God is not mocked. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6:7. The seeds they planted in your life, the rejection, the cruelty, the betrayal, begin to take root in their own lives, but this time, they are the ones who will feel its bitter harvest. At first, it begins subtly. The things they once held so carelessly, the relationships they assumed would always be there, the stability they never questioned, the laughter they once shared, begin to fade. They feel a shift. They notice that the people who once surrounded them with loyalty are growing distant. The same love they denied you is now absent from their own lives. They try to hold on, to maintain control, but no matter how tightly they cling to their comfort, it begins to unravel. Their friendships grow cold. Their home no longer feels like a sanctuary. Their confidence starts to crack beneath the weight of unease. And then, one day, they wake up and realize that they are standing in the very place they once left you. Do you remember how they dismissed your pain? How they acted as if your suffering was an exaggeration? How they thought you would always remain beneath them? Now they understand, because now they are the ones reaching for hands that no longer reach back. Now they are the ones yearning for love that remains out of reach. This is not coincidence. This is God's justice unfolding before them. For it is written, "Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them." Proverbs 26:27. They thought they could mistreat you and walk away untouched. They thought they could break you and never face the consequences. But what they failed to realize is that God does not allow injustice to stand forever. They were given chances. They were given time to change. They were given opportunities to see their wrongs and make them right, but they chose to ignore it. So now, the very things they once took for granted are being stripped away, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. Because what they never understood was this: what they did to you, they ultimately did to themselves. They thought they were harming you, but in reality they were planting the seeds of their own downfall. And now, they are standing in the same emptiness they once left you in. Only this time, there is no one to catch them when they fall, because God is not unjust, because he sees what is done in secret, because he repays every deed, whether good or evil. So as they begin to lose the very things they once held so tightly, they will remember you. They will remember your pain. They will remember your tears. They will remember how they once thought they were untouchable. But God never forgets, for it is written, "The Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him." Isaiah 30:18. And now justice has begun. There is something profoundly unsettling about watching the ones who hurt you slowly experience the very loneliness they once pushed you into. It does not happen all at once. No, it happens in whispers, in the quiet unraveling of the bonds they once took for granted. At first, they do not notice it. They are too consumed by their own self-importance to see what is slipping through their fingers. They continue moving through life as if nothing has changed, convinced that the relationships they cherish will always remain intact. But what they fail to realize is that God is not mocked. The very moment they turned their backs on you, they planted the seeds of their own isolation. Whoever brings ruin on their family will inherit only wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise. Proverbs 11:29. They thought they could speak against you, slander your name, twist the truth to turn others against you. But now the same deceit they used is being turned back on them. The whispers they once started about you have become whispers about them. They notice it in small ways at first. The warmth in their friendships begins to fade. The people who once laughed with them now hesitate. The trust they assumed would never waver now feels fragile, uncertain. And then, one by one, the people around them begin to pull away. They do not understand it. They ask themselves, why are my relationships falling apart? Why do people no longer confide in me? Why do I feel like an outsider in my own circle? But what they fail to realize is that this is exactly what they did to you. Do you remember how they isolated you? How they made you feel like you didn't belong? How they turned others against you, leaving you to wonder why you were suddenly alone? Now the tables have turned. For it is written, "With the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Luke 6:38. The same betrayal they inflicted is now returning to them. At first, they try to deny it. They convince themselves that it's just a phase, that people will come back. They reach out, expecting the same loyalty they once received, but instead they are met with distance. And then the realization sets in. The family members they once relied on no longer trust them. The friends who once stood by them now question their words. The relationships they were so sure of begin to crumble, one after another. And the most painful part? There is nothing they can do to stop it. Because this is not the work of man, it is the hand of God. The Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster. Proverbs 16:04. They thought they could mistreat you without consequence. They thought they could manipulate people into believing lies about you. They thought that by pushing you away, they were securing their own power. But God saw it all, and now He is removing from their lives the very relationships they once valued. Because when you sow division, you reap division. When you plant betrayal, you will one day be betrayed. And when you destroy someone's trust, your own trust will be destroyed in return. The ones who once stood with them now look at them differently. The unity they once enjoyed is now poisoned by the same deceit they used against you. The people they counted on begin to see them for who they truly are. And now they know what it feels like to be alone, to be cast aside, to be doubted, to be the outsider. But what they still do not understand is that this is only the beginning, for God is not finished yet. There is something inevitable about the justice of God. It does not rush, nor does it delay. It arrives exactly when it is meant to. And when it does not whisper. It speaks loudly, powerfully, unmistakably. The ones who wronged you once carried themselves with arrogance. They thought they were untouchable, that their actions would never return to them. When they made you suffer, they did not flinch. When they ignored your cries, they felt no guilt. They believed they had won. But what they failed to understand is that God does not allow injustice to remain unanswered. For we know the one who said, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay." Hebrews 10:30. And now, the same pain they placed upon you has found its way into their own lives. It begins quietly at first, a small discomfort, a subtle unease, nothing they can quite explain, yet something feels different. The things that once brought them peace now bring them distress. The security they once felt now seems fragile. And then it happens. The betrayal, the rejection, the heartbreak. Exactly as they did to you, it is now happening to them. Perhaps they cast you aside, treated you as if your feelings were irrelevant. Now, they find themselves in a place where they are no longer wanted. Perhaps they spoke to you with cruelty, tearing you down with words meant to break your spirit. Now they hear those same words spoken back to them, and for the first time, they understand the weight of their own actions. Perhaps they mocked your suffering, laughed at your pain, dismissed your silent cries for understanding. But now, they sit in the same darkness they once forced you into. And no one is there to save them, because this is the law of the universe. What you put out into the world will always return to you. For it is written, "As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head." Obadiah 1:15. And in that moment, when they are drowning in the very pain they inflicted upon you, they will finally begin to understand. They will remember you. They will remember how they disregarded your suffering. They will remember how they laughed when you cried. They will remember how they thought they were untouchable, but now the weight of their own cruelty rests upon them. They may try to fight it. They may try to pretend that they are strong. They may try to convince themselves that they can handle it. But this is a battle they cannot win, because this is not the doing of man. This is the hand of God at work. For the Lord has said, "Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity." Proverbs 22:8. They thought they were above the consequences of their actions. They thought they would never have to feel the pain they caused. They thought God was not watching. But now they know better, because the very thing they tried to escape has caught up to them, and now they must face what they once ignored. There is a kind of suffering that goes unnoticed by the world. It does not scream, it does not announce itself in grand gestures, it does not break bones or leave visible wounds, but it is just as destructive, perhaps even more so. It is the torment of guilt. At first they feel nothing. The ones who hurt you walk away with their heads held high, believing they have won. They convince themselves that what they did was justified, that you deserved it, that their actions were nothing more than what the situation required. But God sees what they refuse to admit. For it is written, "The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion." They move through life pretending all is well. They smile, they laugh, they carry on as if their hands are clean, but something has shifted. The things that once brought them joy now feel empty. The places where they once found comfort now feel unsettling. The people they surrounded themselves with now seem distant. And then the whispers begin. Not the whispers of others, but the whispers of their own conscience. They hear your voice in the silence. They see your tears in the moments they least expect. They remember the words they spoke, the actions they took, and for the first time, they feel the weight of what they have done. It does not matter how much they try to suppress it. It does not matter how much they try to distract themselves. The guilt follows them. For it is written, "There is no peace, says the Lord, for the wicked." Isaiah 48:22. They cannot sleep the way they used to. The thoughts invade their mind when they lie down, when the world is quiet, when they are alone with nothing but the truth of their actions. And now, the same heartache they ignored in you has taken root inside of them. Have you ever seen someone pretend to be at peace when you know they are not? Their smile does not reach their eyes. Their laughter feels forced. Their presence carries an unease they cannot explain, because guilt is a prison built from the inside. They may try to drown it in distractions, in their work, in their friendships, in meaningless pursuits, but no matter where they go, it follows them. Because this is not the guilt that comes from human regret. This is the guilt that comes when God Himself begins to weigh their conscience. For it is written, "My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They will not belong to the counsel of my people." Ezekiel 13:9. They lied, they deceived, they convinced themselves that they were right, but now the illusion is breaking. Now they sit with the truth they once refused to acknowledge. The same heartache they dismissed in you has wrapped itself around them. The same sleepless nights you endured are now theirs to bear. The same inner turmoil they caused you has now become their own, and they cannot escape it. But because this is not punishment from men, this is the justice of God, and when He moves, there is no place to hide. There is something unsettling about watching a person rise through dishonesty, cruelty, and betrayal. They move through life as if untouched by consequence, as if their actions have no weight, as if justice will never come for them. They scheme, they manipulate, they take what is not theirs, and for a time it seems as though they are winning. But what they do not realize is that their success was never truly theirs. For it is written, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." Psalm 127:1. Everything they have built, every opportunity they took by deception, every advantage they gained by stepping on others, every lie they told to move forward, was built on unstable ground. And when God decides that the time has come, it will all begin to crumble. At first it starts in ways they can ignore. A small setback, a minor inconvenience. They tell themselves it is nothing, but then the losses begin to pile up. The business deal that once seemed so secure falls apart. The job opportunity they counted on slips through their fingers. The reputation they once built so confidently now carries whispers of doubt. One by one, the doors that were once open begin to close. They make plans, but nothing works. They push forward, but nothing moves. They try to hold on to the life they once controlled, but their grip weakens with every passing day. Have you ever seen a person fight against God's judgment? It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is slow, exhausting, relentless. They wake up every morning thinking, "This is just a rough patch. Things will turn around." But days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and still nothing works, because this is not a season of struggle. This is the unraveling of what was never meant to last. For it is written, "The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and He exalts." 1 Samuel 2:7. They thought they could rise without consequence. They believed they could take what belonged to others, destroy those who stood in their way, hurt those who only ever gave them love, and never faced the consequences. But now they are beginning to understand. The strength they once had is failing them. The confidence they once carried is nowhere to be found. The world they built through selfish ambition is falling apart piece by piece. And the most terrifying part? They cannot stop it. They can fight, they can struggle, they can try every trick, every strategy, every manipulation that worked in the past, but nothing changes. Because this is not the doing of men, this is the judgment of God. For it is written, "I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heavens like iron, and your earth like bronze. Leviticus 26:19. Nothing grows, nothing prospers, nothing moves forward. The same way they blocked your path, now their own path is filled with obstacles they cannot remove. The same way they stood in the way of your success, now they find themselves trapped in failure. They thought they had control, but now they realize they were never in control at all. Because God does not allow the wicked to prosper forever, and now they are learning this lesson the hard way. There comes a moment when those who have wronged you begin to feel something they never expected: isolation. It does not happen suddenly, nor does it come with a loud warning. It begins as a subtle shift, an unspoken discomfort, a change in the way people look at them. The ones who once surrounded them with laughter and praise now hesitate in their presence. The friendships they thought were unbreakable now seem fragile. The family members who once defended them now keep their distance. At first, they do not understand it. They tell themselves that people are just busy, that life is pulling everyone in different directions. They convince themselves that nothing is wrong, that things will return to normal soon enough. But deep inside, they feel it, that nagging sense that something is missing. The phone calls that used to come frequently now go unanswered. The invitations they once took for granted no longer arrive. The loyalty they assumed would always be there begins to waver. They try to ignore it. They distract themselves with work, with entertainment, with anything that keeps them from acknowledging what is happening. But the truth is unavoidable. The same way they made you feel alone, the same way they pushed you to the side, the same way they turned others against you, it is now happening to them. They do not see it as justice, not at first. They think it is just an unfortunate coincidence, a temporary hardship. But as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, they start to notice a pattern. The people they trusted the most now treat them with indifference. The very ones they relied on are suddenly unavailable. It is a slow and painful realization, one that creeps in when they least expect it. They sit in a room full of people, yet feel completely alone. They laugh, but it does not reach their heart. They speak, but no one truly listens. And for the first time, they begin to feel what you once felt: the sting of rejection, the weight of abandonment, the emptiness of knowing that the people around them do not truly care. They thought they were untouchable. They believed that they could mistreat you and move forward without consequence. But now they are facing the reality of their own actions. For it is written, "Whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered." Proverbs 21:13. They shut their hearts to you, and now their cries go unheard. They refuse to acknowledge your pain, and now they find themselves in a place where no one acknowledges theirs. They once stood among many, confident in their influence, certain that they would never know what it feels like to be alone. But now, no matter how many people are around them, the emptiness inside remains. The weight of their choices hangs heavy on their shoulders. Perhaps they remember the times when they could have chosen kindness, when they could have offered a hand instead of turning away, when they could have stood by you instead of standing against you. But regret does not change the past. They cannot rewrite what they have done, and now they face the consequences of their own choices. Their isolation is not an accident. It is the divine justice of a God who sees all things. It is not the work of people, nor is it something they can fix with empty apologies or shallow gestures. For it is written, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." Galatians 6:7. They sowed division, and now they live in its aftermath. They created a world where you felt unwanted, and now they walk in that world themselves. The tables have turned, and they are beginning to understand that isolation is not just about being alone. It is about feeling unseen, unheard, and unwanted. The very emotions they dismissed in you now consume them, and no matter how much they try to fight it, no matter how many times they tell themselves that things will get better, the silence around them remains. There is something deeply unsettling about watching someone who once walked with pride now struggling under the weight of failure. They were once untouchable, or so they thought. Everything they desired seemed to fall effortlessly into their hands. Their plans unfolded with ease, their steps carried confidence, and their words held influence. They mistreated you, dismissed you, and spoke against you with certainty, believing that nothing could shake the foundation they had built for themselves. But what they did not realize is that no foundation stands firm when it is built on injustice, cruelty, and deceit. What they believed was their own strength was never truly theirs. It was only an illusion, a borrowed moment of success that could be taken away in an instant. At first, it does not happen in a way that alarms them. A minor setback, an unexpected obstacle. Things that seem small and manageable at first. They tell themselves it is just a rough patch, a temporary struggle that will soon pass. They continue to move forward with confidence, believing that their life will return to the way it once was. But then, one by one, the things they relied on begin to slip through their fingers. The opportunities that once came so easily now seem impossible to grasp. The people who once admired them begin to turn away. The reputation they once took pride in now carries whispers of doubt and criticism. No matter how hard they try, they cannot seem to regain control. They start working harder, pushing themselves to fix what is breaking, but nothing works. Every step forward is met with resistance. Every effort seems to backfire. They feel like they are walking against the wind, fighting against an invisible force that refuses to let them move ahead. Their frustration grows. They cannot understand why things that were once so easy have now become impossibly difficult. They once believed they had the power to shape their own destiny, but now it feels as if something beyond their understanding is working against them. For it is written, "The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples." Psalm 33:10. What they do not realize is that this is not just a streak of bad luck, nor is it simply a test of perseverance. This is the work of God. This is the divine interruption of their path, the closing of doors that they were never meant to walk through, the dismantling of their false security. God is showing them that they were never in control, that their actions were never without consequence, and that their mistreatment of others, of you, was not unnoticed. They begin to question everything. Why is nothing working? Why is every attempt met with failure? Why does it feel like something is blocking them at every turn? The same confidence that once defined them is now overshadowed by doubt. They wake up with a sense of dread, fearing what new struggle the day will bring. They try to regain what they lost, but nothing changes. The doors that once swung open for them remain firmly shut. The favor they once had is nowhere to be found. They look around and realize that while they are struggling, you are rising. The one they try to break, the one they cast aside, the one they thought would never recover. You are walking in blessings they can no longer access. While their plans fail, yours succeed. While they fight against invisible forces, you walk with grace and ease. While their world is falling apart, yours is coming together. For it is written, "He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble." Luke 1:52. They are beginning to understand that they are not facing misfortune. They are facing the very justice of God. The same God who saw their pride, their cruelty, their betrayal. The same God who watched as they harmed you, belittled you, and turned others against you is now setting things right. They are learning through hardship and struggle that their success was never their own doing. It was never secured by their intelligence, their charm, or their connections. Because when God decides that someone's season of pride has ended, nothing they do can keep it from crumbling. They may try to rebuild, they may try to force their way back into a position of power, but the harder they try, the worse things become. They may think they can manipulate their way back to success, that they can find another way to reclaim what they lost, but it will not work. Their life is now marked by frustration, disappointment, and failure. Their prayers feel empty, their efforts feel meaningless. Their heart is heavy with a burden they cannot name, a weight they cannot lift, a struggle they cannot overcome. For the first time, they feel what it is like to be powerless. For the first time, they understand what it is like to strive and gain nothing in return. For the first time, they know what it feels like to be on the other side of loss. And perhaps now, in their lowest moment, they will remember you. They will remember the way they treated you, the way they dismissed your pain, the way they laughed while you suffered. They will remember the times they could have shown kindness, but chose cruelty instead. They will remember the times they could have lifted you up, but instead tried to push you down. And for the first time, they will understand what it feels like to be in that place. For it is written, "He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble." Proverbs 3:34. They are coming to a realization they never expected, that God has humbled them. The pride that once fueled them has turned into shame. The confidence they once had has disappeared. The life they once controlled has become a series of failures they cannot undo, and no matter how much they try to deny it, no matter how much they tell themselves it is just a phase, deep down they know. This is not a coincidence. This is not just a moment of bad luck. This is the work of God. For the same God who allowed them to rise has now brought them low. The same God who watched as they harmed others has now held them accountable. The same God who saw their pride has now left them in the very struggle they once thought they were too powerful to experience, and there is nothing they can do to change it. Because when God decides that someone must be humbled, there is no force on earth that can stop it. There comes a time when every action, every word spoken in cruelty, every betrayal, and every moment of injustice is brought into the light. Those who wronged you, who took advantage of your kindness, who turned family against you, who dismissed your pain, now walk through the very trials they once forced upon you. They thought they were untouchable, but God was watching. They lost the things they once took for granted. Their relationships crumbled. The same pain they inflicted on you has come full circle. Their guilt haunts them, keeping them awake at night. Their success has turned into endless struggle. The world they built for themselves, without accountability, without humility, has fallen apart before their very eyes. And you are still standing, not because you fought back, not because you sought revenge, not because you wasted your time trying to prove yourself to those who refuse to see your worth. You are standing because God Himself has lifted you up. The same God who saw your suffering, who counted your tears, who heard your silent prayers in the darkness. He has been working on your behalf all along. For it is written, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." James 4:10. You did not need to take matters into your own hands. God did it for you. And now you walk forward, knowing that justice has been served, not by your hands, but by the hands of the Almighty. The ones who caused you pain now carry the weight of their own actions. They wanted you to suffer, but instead they have become the victims of their own choices. But here is the most powerful truth. You are free. Free from the burden of anger. Free from the pain of their betrayal. Free from waiting for them to acknowledge what they did. You are no longer trapped by their actions, because God has already handled them. So walk forward, not in bitterness, but in victory. Walk forward knowing that your story was never in their hands, it was always in God's hands. For it is written, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Exodus 14:14. Let them deal with the weight of what they have done. Let them wrestle with their own consequences. Your battle is over, and your future is in the hands of a just and mighty God. Your only task now, rise, move forward, step into the blessings that were meant for you all along, because what they meant for harm, God has turned for your good. Genesis 50:20. And that is the final word. Justice has been served, and God's will has been done. Now go and live in the freedom of His divine justice.